the rest of the day. So my name is Josh Aby, and I'm going to be chairing this very exciting session. I'm a researcher on the staff team at the Fabian Society, and for the last 2 years I've been leading the day-to-day research on our Commission on Workers and Technology project. I'll say a brief bit about that project in a moment, but just firstly to introduce the topic that we're going to be speaking about today. As I'm sure all of us in this virtual meeting room are aware, the impact of new technologies on the future of work sorry, I just had a message come up. Breakouts are go. There we go. The impact of new technologies on the future of work are a critical issue for not only the UK, but countries across the EU and the world. When Keir Starmer has spoken about the next Labour manifesto having to address the challenges of the 2030s as well as the 2020s, these are exactly the kinds of issues that he's talking about: automation and digitalization of the tasks that make up our jobs. We've seen during the COVID crisis those issues and challenges become even more pressing. The crisis has prompted an acceleration in the take-up of some of these workplace technologies, which makes policy responses and responses from employers and trade unions even more crucial than they were before. So to that end, in December, the Fabians and the trade union community published Sharing the Future, which is the final report of our 2-year Commission on Workers and Technology, which spent that time looking at the impact of technology on everyday work in the UK. What we were asking were the questions: how is new technology impacting workers now and over a 10-year horizon, but also what needs to happen to make sure that those changes benefit and are opportunities for workers rather than being a threat or being a risk. So today we're going to be discussing some of the findings and some of the recommendations and associated issues that have come out of that report, as well as exploring some of the challenges that other countries face from similar issues and how they're being addressed in those other countries and at EU level. So just before I introduce our first speaker, some quick housekeeping things. So firstly, our speakers, after their opening remarks, will be taking questions from you, the audience, and I'm sure you know the drill by now. On the left-hand side of your screen, there is a little speech bubble with a question mark inside it. And if you just submit your questions in that question mark speech bubble icon, and it'll come to you. And you can read out your questions when you're ready and after the speakers have made their opening remarks. Secondly, just to remind everyone, we may have some journalists in attendance today, so everything that everyone says is on the record. That might be useful information. And then finally, please do tweet along at our hashtag, which is hashtag FEPSFab21. So that's it from me for now. So to quickly introduce our first speaker, who I'm sure needs no introduction. Yvette Cooper is the MP for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford, and she served as a Labour MP since 1997. She served as the Work and Pension Secretary in the last Labour government. She has served as the Shadow Home Secretary, and she is currently the chair of the powerful Home Affairs Select Committee. And crucially for this session, she was the chair of the Commission on Workers and Technology. So over to you, Yvette.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much. Huge thank you to Josh and to the Fabians, and also to Lauren and Community Union for setting up both the Changing Work Centre that has hosted the Commission, but also the Commission itself, Commission on Workers and Technology. And I think this has been a really important piece of work. It really goes to the heart of the tradition of the Labour movement, which is the Fabians and unions coming together in response to technological change. It's how the Labour movement started, from industrial change, responding to waves of new technology that may have benefited all of us through the generations, but in the short term can also cause great disruption and great inequality as well. And that's what happened. That's how the Labour movement started with the Industrial Revolution, the exploitation, inequality and injustice that we saw alongside the great wealth creation, the great new opportunities that were created. It took the creation of the Labour movement, the trade unions, the coming of the together of the Labour Party, but also a huge amounts of legislation, the Factory Act and so on, and the creation of the welfare state to start dealing with some of that exploitation and injustice. And the thinking behind this commission was we have not got generations to wait while those new institutions are created. We should be responding to each wave of technology now to make sure that the rewards are fairly shared, to make sure that everybody can benefit from the opportunities of new technology and not see inequality simply widen, not see injustice and exploitation grow. So the point of the commission was to look at new technology from the worker's eye, from the worker's point of view, to talk to people across different sectors of the economy. And we toured the country. In the pre-COVID days, we went around the country talking to union members, talking to workers in different sectors, to shop workers, to workers in manufacturing and distribution, about the impact of technology on people's lives, what the opportunities were, but also what the problems and challenges might be. In the middle of all of this, of course, the COVID crisis hit. And we found when we looked at this that the COVID crisis has put some of the challenges and some of the impact of new technology on steroids. Undoubtedly, the new technology within the COVID crisis has helped save jobs for many people who've been working from home, who might otherwise have seen their jobs disappear, for remote ordering and delivering, the businesses that have managed to keep going as a result of new technology. So that has been incredibly powerful as a way of helping us all keep in touch with each other, as a way of creating the vaccines that are, as we speak, saving lives. But the COVID crisis has also accelerated automation that is likely to replace jobs as well. New technology that businesses are adopting now because they cannot have as many people in the workplace mean they won't bring as many people back when the crisis is over. The pubs and restaurants that have got used to introducing ordering by apps, making that more normal, but meaning that they won't bring back as many staff afterwards as well. Businesses operating through online orders who won't need as many physical retail outlets, more home working, less office cleaning and maintenance jobs. So there's a significant risk that people furloughed now will not have jobs to go back to and will be at real risk of long-term unemployment. And we found that 61% of furloughed jobs are in the sectors that are in the highest risk of automation. So that means some people at risk of a double whammy from COVID and from automation. And of course, it is those who are on the lowest income, those who don't have degrees or the highest qualifications, who are at greatest risk. We found too, when we looked at some of the wider issues around technology impact, again, huge potential opportunities from technology, but also real risks and real risks of widening inequality, risks of wealth being concentrated. The ONS found 1.5 million low-skilled jobs are at particular risk. 70% of those are women. 99% of those are people who don't have higher education degrees. So similarly, in the way that we found in the COVID crisis, those who had their jobs either furloughed or have lost their jobs are most likely, far more likely to be on low income than similarly with the automation impact as well. But then, of course, what we also found is that in terms of the response to these kinds of challenges, those who need training most are also least likely to receive it. If you have a degree, you are 4 times more likely to have received recent training at work. So there's not enough support from employers or from government for the kind of training and education that we need. We found there was great potential for a technology to improve the quality of jobs. We saw great examples in Siemens Manufacturing Centre. We're in Asda, in a warehouse, an Asda warehouse in Castleford, my constituency. We talked to some of the workers there about the cooperation that had taken place between the union and the employer that had brought in new technology that had hugely improved people's health and safety, and also had helped fund the pay rise for the staff. So we saw great examples of where cooperation has helped improve the quality of jobs, but we also heard the examples of the exploitation. Again, in distribution and warehousing, the huge contrast with the Amazon warehouse, where we heard evidence about staff being monitored and about the growing insecurity as well, about the changing technologies and the impact that that could have. And crucially, we found very often workers just not getting a say and rarely being involved in the new technology still, and also that workers are also far less likely to be represented by a union in those sectors that are at greatest risk of automation. In food services and accommodation, only 2.3% of the workforce are union members. We've seen during the COVID crisis the benefits of social partnership working. So the fact that we have a furlough scheme is a result of the great working between the TUC and the CBI, unions and employers coming together to put pressure on the government to call for the furlough scheme. That's how we got that, with the support of the Labour Party campaigning for this and for its extension in the first place. So we've seen the potential for people to work together and have an impact, but there are huge challenges now. So we set forward a whole range of recommendations as to what should happen. To just give you a quick flavour of a few of those, most immediately, free training and education for furloughed workers. If many of them may not have jobs to go back to, why are they not being given enough support to get training and education and support right now? To have work and training guarantees, not just the Kickstart programme, just for young people, that is based on the Future Jobs Fund. We should be expanding much further than that, with a major work and training guarantees that people can be fast-tracked onto if they've been furloughed and then they lose their job because they'll already have been out of the workforce for some time. More support for new jobs in caring and environmental work, and support for those sectors that are at greatest risk, like hospitality, as well as for those who have outrageously been excluded from support from the very start of this crisis. Much more support, not just during the crisis, but beyond that, to help people adapt. Massive overhaul of adult skills and help people afford it. So we want statutory training pay and statutory training allowances to be looked at now. Universal credit to support part-time work and part-time training, not just expect people to always do full-time work. To improve the quality of work, we want much stronger social partnerships, and to look at all of our institutions across the economy, doing more around social partnership working, giving a stronger role for employers and unions working together, to more fairly share the rewards of the technology as well, and to give workers a stronger say. Increase the value of caring jobs, the status and pay of caring jobs, with not just the pay rise in the short term that we know we urgently need, but also sectoral bargaining in sectors like care, where we need support over the long term, not just in the short term. And we need leadership from employers, from trade unions, and crucially from government. What we know in the COVID crisis is we can be really radical, we can do things very differently, as we have been forced to do as a result of the crisis this year. As we come out of the crisis, we're going to need to be at least as radical in order to build back better and to make sure we can make the most of the opportunities that new technology bring, but make sure that they don't just widen inequalities, widen injustice, to learn the lessons of what we, the labour movement, did generations ago as we were formed, but that we need to do again now. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a really good overview of the findings of the Commission, and a really good flavour of the kinds of approaches and policy responses that we need to see going forward, and really important to set this current challenge in the historical context of industrial revolutions prior, and how crucial the labour movement was then, and how similarly it will be crucial this time too. Let me now introduce our second speaker. Brando Benifei is an Italian politician. He has served as a member of the European Parliament since 2014 and was re-elected in 2019. He served on the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs during his first term in the European Parliament, and he now leads the Italian Democratic Party delegation in the European Parliament. And he also, very grateful that he spoke to me as part of the Commission's research back in late 2019. Late 2019, seems an age ago now, and contributed to its work. So great to have him contribute to this debate. Over to you, Brando.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to you, and happy New Year. let's hope it's going to be a real, a better year for all we have been living. It's a pleasure for me to be among this distinguished group of speakers, and in general among the speakers of this conference overall, as a long-time friend of FEPS and the Fabian Society. This is the first time we exchange views together after Brexit, which is sad for sure, but I believe it is more important than ever to continue our progressive dialogue. And I wish it could have been in physical presence, but we know it was not possible. I hope there will be soon new occasions like the ones we had in the Labour Party conferences in these years. It is a very important topic, the one that is at the center of this discussion today, workers and technology in the 2020s. It touches upon many different topics and requires necessarily an horizontal fight by progressive movements across the world to uphold our conquests on workers' rights. That needs to be updated and adapted to the digital transformation of society, but it should not be abandoned or weakened. We know that also the government of Boris Johnson is trying to undermine workers' rights in this precise moment with a very aggressive agenda on this. Recently, in these last weeks, there was a global action of a campaign called Make Amazon Pay, an open letter that many of us signed, many MEPs signed and promoted to raise awareness on the imbalances between not just Amazon, but many companies accumulated wealth with a major taxation problem that we know about, and the tough working conditions, salaries, and obstacles to unionization of which we have ample evidence. I believe it is important to keep fighting this battle. The reason why the letter was referred to Amazon is because there was a call made by the company to find analysts that could control movements of workers inside the business. And so that was the occasion to open an attention to put a spotlight on a topic that regards all the big tech companies that also in different ways, I will get to that later, they can undermine workers' rights in new ways. We should not shy away from engaging directly on these issues and keeping also a constant dialogue with the workers, trying to support the way to build a social dialogue also in these sectors that are in fact, in many cases, very new business models, and that needs to be understood and studied on how to regulate them and how to also push the workers to have a stronger say in the activity. Regarding the work specifically of the European Parliament, we have been working on multiple strands of actions: platform workers and bogus self-employment, against using AI software for illegal worker surveillance, or to discriminate against workers through biased algorithms. As a generic principle, the uptake of AI in Europe and its legislation must support the implementation of the EU pillar of social rights, not to go against it. And in general, when we go outside the European Union, it should not overcome existing social norms. I am the shadow rapporteur of the Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence. Shadow rapporteur means that I'm the S&D rapporteur of this new special committee, and we will need to fight with the right wing also in the European Parliament to defend these principles, because you know that there is a push to say we should just disrupt the the job market. We should let this innovation go free. And I think that we risk instead, if we don't regulate correctly, that we create a reaction that is not desirable, because we need to innovate. We need to build new business models. We need to create new jobs through and also a better environment for consumers, if we want to enlarge the discussion, with an intelligent use of new technologies. But we need to be sure that they are respecting all these innovations and new business models, our social model, of which inside or outside the European Union, the European countries have some pillars in them that needs to be maintained, in my opinion, changed, innovated, but not abandoned. Moreover, in times of a pandemic, the need of codification of digital workers' rights has been accelerated in some aspects. One that is very obvious is the increase of smart working and its potentials, and also problems, issues that need to be regulated. To, for example, the issue of the right to disconnect. As socialists, we pushed a report in the European Parliament asking the Commission for a legislative proposal on this. The Commission of the European Union has not foreseen to have an initiative on that, but we thought it needs to update its program and include that too. And this needs to be regulated because it could disrupt, in fact, the advances that we obtained in terms of the work-life balance. So these are just a few points. There are many other topics, but I just wanted to put on the table some food for thought coming from our work in the European Parliament at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brando. That's a really important and interesting contribution. I think it's crucial to emphasise the importance of cross-national action on workers' rights when we're talking about certain firms and corporations that have been enabled and empowered by new technology to perhaps not exactly conform to the social standards and norms that we want and expect as socialists and social democrats. Let me introduce our third speaker. Seema Malhotra is the Labour and Cooperative Member of Parliament for Feltham and Heston, and has been since 2011. She was re-elected in 2019, and she currently serves as the Shadow Employment Minister under Keir Starmer, and has done since April 2020. Seema is also a former chair of the Fabian Society and a long-time friend and supporter of our work. So over to you, Seema.
Thank you very much, Josh. Can I check you can hear me okay? Fantastic. Look, thank you very much. And could I congratulate the Fabians as well on this excellent report? And I do know that it will help shape our thinking, and I think Parliament's thinking on this very key issue of our time. I do very much welcome as well the insights of the panelists, and hope that I can use my comments to just make some short observations, and also just to perhaps help sort of with some contributions about how this issue is playing out as well on the ground. We heard from Yvette and Brando in those very powerful opening remarks about a whole range of issues, and really highlighting how we are seeing the disruption that's coming from technology into the workplace and the economy as we have known it for so very long. And the risk of long-term unemployment that comes for so many who may not be immediately able to benefit from the jobs that are there and the jobs that are coming. But some really important themes around in-work training and coordination, but also, I really recognise the need for the sort of codification of digital workers' rights, and also the importance of cross-country action, cross-national action. I know the OECD and others are doing work on this as well, and it's important that we also play our part in shaping where policy goes internationally too. The report is absolutely right that we are at a crossroads. We as a nation have choices to make about how we're going to secure our economy's recovery and how we're going to choose to rebuild Britain, because we are going to either emerge as a less resilient economy or a more resilient one. So how we're going to invest in and improve productivity of our businesses, in which technology plays a huge part, in order that they also stay competitive, how we're going to have a fit for purpose response to the challenges of COVID for getting people back into jobs that are fulfilling and sustainable, and what that's going to mean for out of work support, and also a lifelong learning strategy that goes alongside how the labour market is changing. People are set to change their jobs around 12 times in their lifetime. That's been unprecedented for previous generations. But this debate does put also at the heart of it that debate about technology and public policy. Are we going to be slaves to the advancements and respondents to focus on mitigating the impacts? Are we going to recognise and perhaps embrace some of those changes that are coming, but set the rules of the game first and provide a greater control and drive for where we want technology to play a part in society? A progressive agenda that has to see us set the direction and put technology to work for us. It is about how we invest in the jobs of the future as well, and do so inclusively. And I want to recognise the power of the state here. We don't often talk about this, but government does have a strategic role in creating the jobs of the future. We have the option to a large extent as we look to a new industrial strategy and plan how to work with local authorities, regions, nations, metro mayors to decide what jobs we're creating and where, and how we spread the opportunity through our recovery and the future more widely. Because creating jobs and wage support, how we keep people in work, reskilling, access to those new jobs, these are all questions for policy. And while we do this, and how we protect families as well through the downturn, because of the longer term impacts of unemployment can be severe in how people then struggle to recover for themselves and for their families with the confidence to be in work. These are deep issues, and it's one of the reasons why we're having the debate in Parliament tomorrow to cancel the cut to universal credit, which will see us go backwards rather than forwards on a whole range of these issues. So we are going to also need to see the government step up to tackle the digital divide in society, which is clearly set to grow. The issues with schools has brought this into sharp relief when it comes to people's learnings. But it's also a wider and deeper inequality that we have been raising through the pandemic when it comes to employment. And when it comes to the children of today who are struggling to keep up with their peers in the classroom, these two are the children that will be either included or excluded from the jobs of the future because they fall so far behind. So without a plan to enable access to new jobs, or indeed stay in existing ones, the consequences will deepen for the most deprived communities for even generations to come. But I also do want to thank all the commissioners involved on this report, which is a hugely impressive piece of work. And the conversations with workers, insights from real workplaces, make it clear how important trade unions like Community, Prospect and others are in representing workers in this very fast-moving economy. The title of the report is indeed inspired as well. It absolutely sums it up, that the future will be shared between workers and technology, but it won't necessarily all be one way. Technology can also create jobs. It will also create jobs. And some of the questions we have is going to be how we're going to also recognise where it will change jobs. I know in aviation, for example, when I've talked to those in and around the Heathrow economy, how they've talked about how COVID has brought technology and changed jobs, even those that are cleaning, security, how science is playing a bigger part and will continue to do so in a post-COVID world as well. So how we recognise how jobs are also going to change and technology plays a part is also what we've got to address. There were a number of these questions and answers, well, not quite answers, but working towards answers in a recent Westminster Hall debate as well. And what COVID has done is see a change in behaviours as well, accelerated as well as Yvette said, what businesses were already doing, probably accelerated by 5 years, some trends in technology and the changes of jobs and work. But we've also seen changes in behaviours, accessing public services online, video calls with doctors, shopping, the new kind of the advent of Zoom and Teams and all these other platforms, even Parliament adapting to remote working, something I think would have been unthinkable against the sort of culture and tradition that we've had when we've looked at trying to see change. But we are also entering a sort of decade of unsettled economic transition. And it isn't all good, because we've heard examples of how, whilst technology can create work which is safe and fulfilling and rewarding, it can also do the opposite, which is create work that is soulless, exploitative and uncertain. And I think we've had reference as well, and been struck by the work of Prospect in how unscrupulous bosses can put their workers under surveillance, especially even at home, looking at what websites they're accessing, etc. So some of these roles for the safe and good workplaces of the future are also areas around policy that we need to look at. So we'll just sort of wrap up as well with a few remarks, because clearly it's going to need the government to intervene to help shape the future, because if we leave it to the free market, we'll sort of foresee a future of low wages, regional disparity, mass unemployment and technological inequality. This is further at risk in the context in which we now operate, because if we look for us at the Brexit trade deal, which offers protections on labour and environmental standards that are dangerously weak, it leaves huge scope for a UK government to downgrade our rights and protections, which has already been reported on Friday as happening with the Working Time Directive under threat. We've also seen the economic crisis show that GDP fell by 2.6% in November, and also 1 million jobs lost, vacancies remaining 30% below the pre-crisis levels. But also ethnic minorities, young people, single mothers, and the lowest paid seeing their employment hit the hardest, with that double hit as well on BAME communities affected not just by the economic challenges, but also by the health crisis. These are also likely to be people less likely to work at home, and those who will struggle with those jobs of the future. So as well as thinking about how we look to addressing things like the care crisis, we've got to look to how sectors are going to need to be targeted to grow, to build our economic resilience. And it's Labour's approach that has to be based on intelligent, targeted interventions to build resilience in the economy, secure productivity, growth and fairness. That's why I believe this report is so useful, because it does set us up on that direction, because it's imperative a decent society leaves no one behind. It's Labour that's going to be able to address how we secure the economy, protect families and rebuild Britain in a way that will grow and share prosperity, with jobs that are secure, skilled and well paid in every region. We're going to need to think radically, and the Fabians must be at the heart of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seema. Some really important points there, especially the overarching theme of the strategic role of government, not just in job creation, but in the nature of job creation. I'll come on to our final speaker now, who is Lauren Crowley. She is currently the head of equality at the trade union community. She's held various roles there over the last 5 years. And importantly, she was instrumental in setting up the commission in the first place, and forming its remit and its terms of reference. And she's been working and driving its work throughout its 2 years. So I'll give the floor to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Josh, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. But also, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, you and your colleagues, but you particularly, Josh, for your dedication to this hugely important piece of work over the last 2 years and getting it to where it is today. As you said, Community helped start this commission in partnership with the Fabian Society. And one of the reasons that we did that was a few years ago, there was a lot in the press about how many robots were coming and how many jobs were going to be lost, and these sort of grand estimations of the percentage of jobs that were going to be lost as a result of the introduction of technology. And we analysed our membership as a trade union and identified that you know, 60% of our membership would be at high risk of losing their jobs if the estimations that were coming out were true. But almost everybody would be subject to some change in their roles or job tasks in some way. So we could have chosen to be reactive, to try and deal with the fallout of redundancies or works closures, as we're so used to doing. And we certainly knew that the pace of technology change was so fast that it couldn't be stopped, and nor would we want to, because we believe that technology can be a real positive force for change, as long as we get ahead of it and make the policy interventions to protect workers now. But we let workers down if our answer is to stand in opposition to globalization and technological advancement, because both are happening whether we like it or not. And we must find ways to make this change work for working people, and not just those at the top of companies making the decisions to invest in technology. So there's a real opportunity to create a different relationship between work and individuals. And we believe that people need work, a sense that you are contributing to your society as a part of the social contract. If benefits of technology change are managed, there are opportunities for a future of better work, more freedom and flexibility over work, and more shared wealth, as well as social benefits. But as we've seen in the research, there's a real risk that technology deepens inequalities. Society produces more, but wealth continues to go to the top. And we have a historic failure as a country of supporting people to go through economic transitions. So we'll do a huge disservice to the country if we sit back and let the market decide what technology does to the economy. And a YouGov poll we ran during the commission shows only 16% of employees with a trade union in their workplace think their union is taking steps to help ensure that new technologies improve their working life. And further polling showed how few workers felt they were being consulted before technology was introduced in the workplace. And it would be remiss of us not to consider how technology change impacts certain groups who are already vulnerable to change in society. Our research shows that technology change will most impact women, disabled workers, older workers, younger workers. And we've seen that in a pronounced way over the last few months with the coronavirus pandemic. People from equalities groups are already disadvantaged, generally already earning less as a whole. They're more likely to be less skilled, less likely to access training, more likely to lose their jobs, less likely to be able to relocate for work. And we can put measures in place to prevent that if we have policymakers, companies and trade unions that are willing to work together to make it happen. Technology is already changing work, and if we wait until it's already happened to make these crucial interventions, then we know it's the disadvantaged groups and towns, the working class, that will lose out the most. So the role of trade unions in the future world of work hinges partly on what we do in response to technology. Yet it goes to the heart of trade unionism. As Yvette said, trade unions were created to deal with the challenges posed by the Industrial Revolution, and we have a situation now that is similar in many ways. We've learned lessons from the past that stand us well to deal with this change, but we won't get it right if we also just continue doing things the way we always have done. Much of the way that we work now hasn't changed much in 100 years. At Community, we have a proud history of navigating change for our members. When our traditional industries changed over the last century, we stayed with them beyond the workplace, helping them to reskill and find new work. And that means our union looks very different than it did in terms of the members we represent and the industries. But workplaces need to change so that change is planned and managed with workers at its heart, not as an afterthought. But that means trade unions need to change too. We need to encourage innovation and modernisation. There's opportunities in this for workers to be heard and the voice of workers to be heard, and for trade unions to be of huge value to workers in society. Trade unions already deliver thousands of skills training courses to workers every year, so it's been extremely disappointing to see the government announce that they're going to cut the Union Learn funding, which will prevent that from happening. And evidence shows that strong worker voice and representation leads to better management of transitions, better long-term outcomes for both businesses and workers. And we need meaningful consultation and influence over technology change by cooperating with employers and government at every level. And that's exactly why we set up this commission. There's a plethora of research emerging that tries to predict the impact of automation. What has been missing until now is the voice of the worker and how we shape that change so as it is happening, so that technology change is as good for workers as it is for business leaders. The UK needs a strategy to realise a future where everyone across our society can work in fulfilling and well-paid jobs. And I believe our report sets out a compelling vision for how we can start to build that future. Now we need everybody to get to the table and take on that task. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Some really important points there on the importance of partnership, meaningful partnership between employers, unions, and government, and also how trade unions themselves can change and need to change to support more workers through these transitions. So we're going to open the floor to questions now, and I note that people have been asking questions in the little question icon bar that I mentioned at the start. So we don't have long, so I think what I'm going to do is, instead of bringing people in, which over the last day we've seen can take a little bit of time to get people's videos up on the screen, what I'll do is read out some people's questions. I'll just pick a selection from the sidebar. I'll do 3 questions at a time, I think, and do keep asking away in that chat. So the first question comes from James Shewood. He's asked a few questions, but I'll pick one of his, which is, what are the panel's views on big data? And I suppose the kind of issues to do with big data, we partially kind of covered them in the Commission report, but they fell somewhat outside of the scope of the report. But obviously they cross over to a large extent with a lot of the issues that we are talking about. So the issues to do with big data, the challenges that we face, and what solutions might be proposed to meet those challenges. So we've got a question from an anonymous audience member. The question is, do you think Labour is doing enough to tackle the digital divide? And I suppose for Brando's benefit, that this could apply to social democratic parties across the European Union. So I suppose just interpret the digital divide. I suppose inequalities thrown up by the increasing use of digitalization in workplaces and throughout society. And then a question from D. Duther. I'll read this out. So my question is about protecting the rights of new digital workers. Global on-demand workforce has been nurtured by crowd-based platforms and creates micro tasks such as tagging images, extracting keywords, etc. These workers have no rights and are exploited both at home and internationally. Often governments are afraid to challenge these practices. This is a piece of work for a digital age. This is piecework for a digital age. What would differentiate Labour's strategy in securing rights for these workers? And similarly, I think that question applies to social democratic parties across the EU, and also what are trade union strategies for protecting those kinds of workers. So if I could put that question to the panel. So I don't know who to go to first. I'll go to Yvette first.
On mute as ever. I'm not sure I wrote all of those questions down to try and run through them. I think the first question is around big data. I think there's a whole series of issues raised by this. Obviously, some of it is just about the new kinds of skills that people need for the sorts of jobs that emerge. But we also looked at some of the issues around if you have use of big data and artificial intelligence or automated decision making, and the analysis of it, you can end up with decision making that reinforces existing inequalities and existing injustices. And so some of the recommendations that we made were around having a sort of full review of the way in which some of that AI might be used, some of the way in which that could be used in recruitment, for example, or making decisions about recruitment that end up simply replicating some of the inequalities and the injustices, the lack of diversity or the discrimination that might be built into existing big data simply becomes replicated in the future decisions that are being made. On the digital divide question, it's just shameful the way in which the government has completely failed on the sort of laptops, the support for young people, for children who are at home, and in terms of their access to education and schooling, that is becoming more and more acute and will have real serious long-term consequences. For us, there was also the issue, of course, though, about the adult digital divide. And so people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, all needing to be able to keep up with the most up-to-date digital skills. And so it's why one of our recommendations, as Lauren referred to, is that the Union Learning Fund should be being expanded, not abolished, should be being expanded, because you need that continued access through different routes to those sorts of skills. And then on the issue about the sort of digital workers, digital piecework, and the kind of new kinds of jobs that can end up being exploited because they're so fragmented, and can be exploited in the same way, very difficult to unionize when you're fragmenting the workforce in that way. So we've recommended a platform economy council to start looking at some of these issues around bits of the gig economy, different kind of platform economy. And it's true that some of those digital jobs would very much fit into this, which we'd look at trying to build some of the sort of social partnership approach that in the UK we never had around some of the traditional manufacturing in the way that other countries, Germany or Sweden or other countries, did, to try and build that employers, unions, workers' representatives being able to come together and set out what would good standards be. What would the good standards be around jobs, employment pay, those sorts of things? Then you can look at, well, what is the kind of regulation? What is the kind of enforcement or rights or that should underpin that as well? But we thought trying to bring organisations together to work in partnership to set that out, rather than just standing back saying, well, it's up to the market, we'll just ignore those sectors of the economy because it's a bit too complicated. That's the kind of, I think, the way the Conservatives are going. We thought we should take a different approach.
Thank you for that. Yes, Brenda's back. I was going to come to you next, Brenda, on those questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think that it's we have been confronted with an objective difficulty. This paradigm shift. I mentioned some technologies earlier, like the artificial intelligence. It's accelerating very fast, and this doesn't cope with the complexities of our democracies. I see a huge challenge in front of us, in the sense that if we maintain as a value our peculiar European model, combining liberal values of freedom of speech, of civil rights, of political freedom, with a social model that is very strong compared to other parts of the world, this unity, it's confronted with the challenge by authoritarian regimes. And part of this challenge is linked to the disruptions being put in place by technology. So I think that we need to have stronger institutions able to deliver not just at the nation state level, but at global level on these issues. And obviously nationally, in each country, it will be very important that our parties, in this sense, the question was, what are we doing? What are we not doing? I think that we need to concentrate on the inclusion, on the fact that today we are under a risk of seeing a class divide based on the capacity of accessing digital skills, digital knowledge, understanding of what is being a digital citizen today. It's not just about worker skills, which is extremely important. We are discussing about that. There were some observations on that about the need for the lifelong learning to be strengthened. But it's also a matter of democracy. If you are used by technology and you don't understand it, you don't understand what is to be today a digital citizen, then you are weakened in your capability of being an active person in the public sphere. You will be manipulated and you will not understand it. So this needs to be one of our strong focuses. I think we should do more on this, because we also need to focus, if I can add, more on the challenges. It's not just about workers' skills. It's also how to make our democracy resilient to changes that are very quick and are difficult to respond to with our democratic structures. Authoritarian regimes can take other ways, but if we want to keep our democracies, we need to reflect on how to work on these discrepancies that I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Brando. Can I bring Seema in on those questions?
Great, thank you. I'll just make a couple of additional points. I think the question of big data is a very challenging one. There are risks from how data might be used, and if we look at sort of the misuse of algorithms for calculating exam grades, the risk of building in to how we use data discrimination that could be based on postcode, it could end up being surname, it could be a number of ways, and there's a very important dimension to the rules around what we might be using data for and how we might be using it. There are also obviously very complex questions still. I know Ivana Bartoletti has been writing some very important pieces on this, with privacy, competition, data protection still being huge issues in which we haven't really got clarity about how we're moving forward with regulations at home and internationally. And so I do think that, and alongside even the sort of question on the digital divide, look, we've done a lot more in government, and particularly through this time, in Parliament, and particularly through this time, than the government has on recognising the issues and needing a plan to address the digital divide. And way before the media really grasped it as an issue. This is the problem in Parliament sometimes, in that sort of it's hard to get heard, particularly as the opposition. But if you look at even what Chion Wura was doing in sort of January, February, March, this has continued to be on our agenda, and it must continue to be so. The media is now catching up, and I think this is why the government is belatedly coming in with its woefully late responses on education. But I mentioned that we've raised this in relation to how those who are seeking support, job support, when they can't go into libraries, when they can't go into job centres, with so much being a conversation between a claimant and a work coach when they've got less than 10 minutes every 2 weeks. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous for thinking that we're being inclusive when it comes to the economy, when the government said pretty much nothing on this that we've continued to raise. So I'm sure that it will continue to be an issue, and it must go kind of cross departments, because it's going to be an issue in health and all sorts of other areas too in a post-COVID and COVID world. And in terms of rights for workers, particularly in sort of digital economy, I didn't fully catch the question, but I'll just make this comment that it's an area, I completely agree with what Yvette was saying, and what Community and the Fabians have been saying in this important report as to a sort of place to start and some of the new structures that need to be put in place. But also Andy McDonnell and I, who Andy, who's the Shadow Minister for Employment Rights, have been looking at some of these issues in the context of the Good Work Agenda, which is sort of 3 years on with only a handful of recommendations, perhaps about, I think about 10 or 15% of recommendations haven't been taken forward by the government. Without constant pressure, this will go off the government's radar. And it's vital that we continue to keep it there, because it's going to become even more serious as we come out of the sort of COVID period and as the economy changes.
Thank you, Seema. And finally, can I bring in Lauren on these 3 questions?
Yeah, I'll be brief, but I just wanted to touch on, there was a point that Vet made about how the government's decisions around children have accessed the internet and technology during this time. And I just wanted to give one example of that. My brother's 3 kids have all been told that they all need to be on Zoom meetings with their teachers at the same time in separate rooms, whilst being supervised by adults on the same internet connection on 3 different devices. And I mean, they only have 2 parents and one's out at work. You have to wonder how, you know, how these things are thought through for people who aren't necessarily like them. And in terms of disability, which was touched on in the comments as well, I mean, this technology can be hugely beneficial to workers with disabilities in many ways, but I've got lots of members within my union as well who have been completely isolated by the pandemic because of the fact that they have no access to technology during this time, and if they're also shielding because they're at risk, they are completely isolated other than their maybe landline phone, and I have real fears that those 2 examples, but many more, that the divide will just keep growing over this time because of what's happening at the moment. And the scale of change that is needed to make sure that everybody is prepared for what's coming is so great, that every institution, every level of government, every council, every school every employer needs to be preparing workers for change and making sure that everybody has got access to technology. And at the moment, it's just not happening fast enough. On data as well, the issues around data usage, as well as, you know, the discrimination that can happen through the way that companies use data. There's a huge issue that not many people are talking about, which is who owns that data and how much control do workers have over their own personal data. Have they given consent to their employer for their employer to be collecting this data? And then how is that data used? You know, in our own workplaces, we've seen employers penalising workers because they're timing them. You know, they're timing how long they're stepping away from their desktop computers to go to the toilet, and then taking them through disciplinary processes because they've been away for too long. And in some circumstances, if you are disabled or you've got some other reason why maybe you need to be away from your computer, and that's not being taken into account, then we're seeing discrimination happen as a result of that misuse of data. And understanding as well, because, you know, you start a new job and you get handed a piece of paper as a worker and you sign it. And there might be a line in there from your employer about how that data is going to be used, and you've signed it, and not enough is being done to educate people about what that data means, what is big data, and what is the government going to do about that. That's why we've recommended that wholesale review of the legislation that Yvette talked about.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm conscious that it is now, we've run 1 minute into the lunch break, and it's important that everyone gets a break from their screens during the day. So I'm very sorry that we've only got to 3 of your questions. There are lots of excellent questions in that question bar, but thank you for all engaging and asking them. And thank you so much to our panel of speakers for their contributions today. It's been really interesting. I'm sure you'll all agree. But yeah, thank you very much, and see you all back here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi everybody. The sessions will start at 1:45 for this afternoon. Have a good lunch.